With the passage of the Cannabis Reform Act, Maryland stands at a crossroads. A battle unfolds, not just in fields and stores, but in the very heart of justice and economic freedom.
This is the state of Maryland wanting to have basically Soviet cannabis.
I lost 74% of my revenue overnight, and I had state representatives come into my store and tell me that if they see me selling any of these products, that I would get a misdemeanor charge and a $5,000 fine.
We're trying to free the plant, and we're trying to make sure that we take the handcuffs off the plant. For me, it actually seems like it's working in reverse.
In this epic saga, from the halls of justice to the fields of green, Maryland's cannabis community stands united against the monopoly, threatening the very fabric of economic liberty and social equity.
Large cannabis corporations can exploit the lottery system by having the ability to afford more application opportunities.
We need to stop playing with them because they aren't playing with us. The government always plays games on the ignorance of people.
How can this be equitable? How can this be freedom? How is this even possible?
Every step of it was created to nod to the minority community and those who had suffered while setting things up to go to their friends.
Social equity in cannabis is a joke. It's an absolute joke. It is a joke. It's a smokescreen. How do you put me out of business and call it social equity?
This is not just a battle for cannabis, but a fight for the future, a struggle for the soul of an industry where freedom, equity, and justice must prevail.
This is a very unique opportunity in American history to say that cannabinoids, THCs, we're now in a free and open market, and we should do everything we can to protect that free market.
The battle wages on, but together, we write the future. This is Weed Wars, Maryland's monopoly and the fight for free markets. As our journey into the underbelly of the cannabis industry in Maryland continues, we peel back the layers behind the unconstitutional licensing scheme set up by the state and speak to those who have been left behind by the tidal wave of misinformed legislation. And as the hemp industry continues its fight for their right to exist, we continue our conversation with the plaintiffs in the lawsuit from the hemp industry challenging the state's monopoly.
Once upon a time in the Soviet Union, you had 2 or 3 cars you could choose from. They were all made in the same factory, and they were all terrible. The reason is because there was no competition. They knew that you had to buy the Soviet automobile no matter what car you wanted. You couldn't go to the West and get another one. And this is the state of Maryland wanting to have basically Soviet cannabis. It'll have what we say is in it. It'll be as strong as we say it will be. This doesn't leave any room for people who want to make unique edible products, unique smokable products, unique tinctures, any of those things that people might want to make on their own. So I'm looking forward to seeing this industry continue to grow and not have every county have 2 or 3 state-run stores where people line up, down the block to buy something from the state for 3 times as much money as they used to pay for it.
The lawsuit filed by the hemp industry was about more than just hemp. This lawsuit tackled the monopolistic nature of cannabis policy in Maryland head-on. Not only does the hemp industry agree that the state has a right to regulate intoxicants, the industry was trying to help the state do just that with the introduction of House Bill 1204, which aimed to regulate these products and protect public safety. That bill died immediately, with Chairman of the House Economic Matters Committee, C.T. Wilson, stating that he could not allow the hemp industry to grow. The passage of the Cannabis Reform Act forced these lawful existing hemp companies to shut down their businesses and then compete with thousands of people for 70 licenses in order to continue selling their products. These businesses were literally destroyed overnight.
We put together a bipartisan bill that would have legitimized the hemp industry in every single way. It would have protected public safety. It would have given you a way to track these businesses. It would have had a licensing structure. It would have had a way for enforcement and penalties. It was everything. It was all inclusive. And we expected that bill to go, but instead they killed that bill, didn't even let it go to a second reading, and then dropped the Cannabis Reform Act on us, which banned all of these products outside of having a cannabis license, meaning we would have to go and get a cannabis license in order to be able to continue to sell the products that we had already been selling for 5 years. None of that makes any sense.
For starters, you're not going to get a tear out of me in this part of it, but the sentiment is there, and that I came from nothing and built a business that not only fulfilled parts of me that were empty for so many years prior, but contributed to a community and genuinely helped people who were suffering. And watching that all fall apart, as well as the businesses of people who have become friends, almost family, is devastating. Once session was coming to an end, our bills weren't heard, and our lobbyists were starting to answer the phone a little less when we were calling, feeling a little less enthusiastic. We started looking for an off-ramp. At this point, we were asking for, at the very least, a sunset period. We've got businesses throughout a state with collectively millions of dollars worth of inventory that you're now saying is going to be illegal in a matter of, in a short period of time without enough time to offload it. We were told no to that as well. And that's when we realized we have no other choice but to file this lawsuit.
So once the bill was signed into law and the milligram caps were put into place, it essentially shut down 80% of our business. We were forced to look into other opportunities to move our operations out of state as we investigated the opportunity to acquire a cannabis license, as the new law required of hemp producers still producing and selling these products. As we looked into the requirements in order to obtain a license through the Cannabis Administration, we found that you needed to meet certain social equity provisions. Those social equity provisions were based on zip codes, and our farm, being a rural location, did not meet those social equity zip code requirements. And because of that, we were unable to even be able to apply for a license. Without having a license, we were forced to move our retail operations into West Virginia, which cost my family and our business thousands of dollars beyond our financial ability at that time, especially since we had 80% of our products taken from us. We looked into other avenues, and the last option that we saw in saving our business was taking the state to court and fighting for our rights.
The Maryland hemp industry and many of the retail operators, distributors, manufacturers that I've spoken to in Maryland are agreeable to legislation. They're agreeable to regulation. They're agreeable to 21 plus packaging requirements, testing requirements, safety standards. They want their products to be safe. They want their consumers who are using these products to use safe products. They want to get rid of as many bad actors as possible and prevent this negative narrative or negative image of the industry from permeating.
The Maryland hemp industry fought for more than 2 years to protect their industry from the overreach of the legislature and the greed of the cannabis giants. One of these large cannabis multi-state operators, Green Thumb Industries, has a direct tie to Maryland Governor Wes Moore. He sat on the board of GTI, which does business in Maryland, for 4 years and stepped down in 2022 to run for governor. He then placed $1.2 million of cannabis stock that he owns in GTI into a blind trust only days before signing the Cannabis Reform Act into law and destroying countless hemp businesses.
You have an unbelievable board of directors with diverse backgrounds, and I immediately spotted someone I am so impressed with. We interviewed many times, that I've met many times. Wes Moore, he's the chief executive officer of Robin Hood, New York City's largest poverty-fighting organization. How does he help out Green Thumb?
Well, look, the whole cannabis industry, we cannot be blind to the fact that we're building an industry on top of something that has been still federally illegal, but has put people in jail and has victimized many through the war on drugs. And so Green Thumb has been a leader in how to take advantage of social equity, enable opportunity.
Right now, there is a moat around our business, both in the states and the country. The federal prohibition provides a moat around our business for us to execute.
Green Thumb Industries is reportedly targeted by federal investigators over possible corruption regarding their political donations and other actions taken in pursuit of cannabis business permits. The story was first published by the Chicago Tribune, who cited unverified sources alleging the existence of the probe by federal authorities. Despite the claim, no criminal charges against the multi-state operator or its executives have been filed so far. Chicago-based Green Thumb, which has become one of the top cannabis companies in the country since its founding in 2014, currently owns 56 retail locations across 15 states and has an estimated market cap of $5 billion. GTI and their affiliates have made campaign donations to politicians and organizations not only in Illinois, but in various other states, including Ohio, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Maryland.
The elected officials who are in the committees, who are overseeing the industries and the sectors of the economy of our state, are awash in funding donations from the industries that they regulate.
Luke Jones is the director of Maryland NORML, a state chapter of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, dedicated to reforming cannabis laws for a safer and more equitable society through advocacy, education, and community engagement. His approach to cannabis reform is multifaceted, aiming to reduce unnecessary encounters between citizens and law enforcement and to champion a free market system that ensures accessibility and fairness. Luke's leadership in Maryland NORML is not just about advocating for the legalization of cannabis. It's a broader fight for individual liberty, social justice, and economic opportunity in the face of monopolistic practices that threaten the essence of democracy.
One of the hats that I wear is serving as executive director for the state chapter of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. We've been campaigning for legalization in the state since at least 2012, organized as a state chapter in 2014. I got involved in 2016. We encountered a big problem, and our members would say to us, why is there not a legalization bill moving forward, right? We clearly have a majority. Why is there not a legalization bill moving forward? And I didn't quite have a good answer. I kept saying, well, we need to get more democratic. We need to get more citizens coming to Annapolis. We need to write more emails. And what we found is that is absolutely pure theater. What we discovered was that we have a deep crisis in our democracy, a deep crisis in our democracy. What I mean is that the arteries of the government in the Maryland General Assembly are not responsive to what the majority of the citizenry cares about. They're convened and they're responsive to those who are contributing financially into the political system. It takes a full-time actor to have your voice and your interests represented in the Maryland General Assembly. Only those who can pay somebody to go represent their interests tend to get their interests represented. So if you can't pay someone to spend full time representing your interests in Annapolis, your interests generally are not well represented.
Throughout the making of this film, we pulled as many campaign finance records as we could find to show you, the audience, exactly how much money is being funneled into the Maryland General Assembly by just a handful of cannabis companies in their attempt to influence legislation and regulations, and how the ballot initiative to legalize the adult use of cannabis was the subject of massive donations by the existing cannabis giants instead of being led by the nonprofit sector and advocacy groups. According to Maryland's campaign finance reporting system, the 2022 adult use cannabis ballot referendum was over 94% funded by major cannabis companies and ancillary businesses to get cannabis legalization on the ballot and pass a constitutional amendment. Of the $480,000 raised to fund the ballot initiative, over $450,000 was given by cannabis-connected businesses, leaving the charge Scott's Miracle-Gro with a $100,000 donation. Other major contributors included Trulieve and Summit Brewers, each giving $50,000. PharmaCann and Cresco Labs contributing $35,000 apiece, while Green Thumb Industries, formerly led in part by Governor Wes Moore, and TerrAscend each added $25,000 to the pot. The Maryland Wholesale Cannabis Trade Association, led by Van Wingerden, threw in another $23,000. Curio Wellness stands out, with its combined donations amounting to roughly $85,690, reflecting a deeper investment in shaping policy outcomes. These contributions from key players in the cannabis industry highlight a concerted effort to influence Maryland's cannabis policy landscape, showcasing the sector's proactive engagement and financial commitment to securing favorable legislative environments. Speaking during an interview in 2019, Mackie Barch from Culta blatantly states that this industry should not be open to everyone, and that lobbying and political engagement is the key to creating a favorable environment for large operators like Culta at the expense of small business participation.
We were on a fast track for adult use, which is now no longer happening for a few more years, up until about 6 months ago. And the work group had a very bad trip to Colorado, and they saw what an unregulated cannabis market looks like. And I know we get a lot of people out there saying, well, it should be open to everybody. And the fact is, it should not be open to everybody because most people aren't qualified to run businesses. That's just the truth. If you don't have a strong trade association and you're not really lobbying or whatever your state capital is, you're going to get run over. And if you're not acting politically, your regs are going to be terrible. And we see a lot of states with bad regs because the people were not invested in the process. And some of that stuff is going to court. Some of that stuff is filing lawsuits.
The General Assembly was occupied territory. before we even got there. This is one of the oldest stories where political systems break down. It is the most fundamental needs of any democratic society, is to keep the moneyed interests out of the public policy design and implementation conversation, because otherwise the whole thing is designed for their interests. And the cannabis licensure, the limited number of licenses they've established for this one sector of our economy, is a perfect microcosm of a larger issue. And anyone who goes in and understands what is happening with the Maryland legal cannabis industry should find themselves appalled. You should find yourselves disgusted by any measure, whether you're thinking about it from a public safety, a public interest, a social justice. It is obviously corrupt. It is obviously corrupt. Now, what I found was, this is me trying to answer our members, saying, why do we not have legalization? Why do we not have the right to grow cannabis? I can brew alcohol in my home enough to kill my kids, and I can brew enough of it to kill myself. It's a deadly substance, and it's not illegal. But I couldn't cultivate a cannabis plant. And it was obviously ridiculous, at the risk of getting dragged off to jail, and losing my liberty around that. But now I do have access to it, but only from a business, a limited monopoly established by the state. Now, when you have state legislation paired with the interests of a monopoly, you have fascism. And when you go into a political system with a naive expectation that your government is going to be responsive to what is clearly a majority view, and they don't move, but they do move to protect a grotesque return on investment for a small group of people. And even if all of those people were African American women, it still would be unjust, because it leaves the vast majority of the people out of the economy at the risk of losing their liberty. The police will come in and arrest you for it, to defend an artificial monopoly.
As we continued our research, we found not only that these major cannabis players made huge contributions to the ballot measure, but that they also made massive political contributions to key legislators and government officials that would be influencing cannabis policy in 2023. Maryland's campaign finance reporting system showed that these key cannabis players gave money not just as a corporate entity, but also as private citizens. Maryland law allows for donations of up to $6,000 per lawmaker by any person or entity. Knowing this, cannabis monopolists like Jake Van Wingerden from Some Med Growers spreads his donations out to countless legislators through both his business and as a private citizen. Since 2021, Some Med Growers' contributions total over $60,000, with major donations going to Governor Wes Moore, Attorney General Anthony Brown, Senate President Bill Ferguson, Speaker of the House Adrian Jones, Senate sponsor of the Cannabis Reform Act Brian Feldman, and a $5,000 donation to the Maryland Democratic Party. In addition, Jake's personal donations totaled over $80,000 and included even more cash for Governor Moore, as well as the Senate co-sponsor of the Cannabis Reform Act, Antonio Hayes, Chair of the Senate Finance Committee, Melanie Griffith, and the sponsor and co-sponsor of the House version of the bill, Chairman C.T. Wilson, and Delegate Vanessa Atterbury, with yet another $5,000 donation to the Maryland Democratic Party. Jake's total contributions between his personal and his business total over $150,000 since 2021, with nearly 10% of that going to Governor Wes Moore's campaign. The same can be said about Curio Wellness, with over $35,000 in contributions since 2021. Over the same time frame, Mackey Barch and Culta donated over $40,000 to legislators and government officials. When looking at the dates of many of these donations, nearly 20% of these contributions take place after campaigning is over and right before a legislative session begins. Although taking and offering donations is 100% legal when done in a transparent way, it is easy to discern how these cannabis companies have spent countless dollars to influence cannabis policy in Maryland in an attempt to bend the laws in the way that favors their interests. These contributions are in addition to the millions spent on lobbyists, PR, and legal professionals, with the obstacles in front of them looking more and more insurmountable. The plaintiffs in the lawsuit from the Hemp Coalition were counting on the impartiality of the judiciary to provide relief for them and their industry.
So we filed a lawsuit against Governor Wes Moore, the Maryland Cannabis Administration, and the Maryland Alcohol, Tobacco, and Cannabis Commission. We filed suit against them because what happened is a travesty. My business that I built over the last 5 years, that I built to $1.3 million with my wife, that I started with $8,000, was stripped from me July the 1st. I lost 74% of my revenue overnight. And I had state representatives come into my store and tell me that if they see me selling any of these products, that I would get a misdemeanor charge and a $5,000 fine. For doing what? What I've been doing for 5 years? Helping people improve the quality of their lives? Why? Because a small minority business owner or an immigrant business owner on a smaller level is playing the game now we want to come after. Same thing is happening across the state. There are countless people who should be a part of this industry that won't be because of these arbitrary license caps, because of this ridiculous social equity criteria that has nothing to do with real social equity. The people who deserve to be in the industry will never be in the industry. And so we filed suit against the state. If you want to force us to get a cannabis license, don't make the process for getting a cannabis license insurmountable. Make it fair, make it balanced, make it even, make it equal. But you're not doing that.
The passage of the Cannabis Reform Act laid the groundwork for businesses to begin entering the adult-use cannabis market. But just as the lawsuit from the hemp industry claimed, the state created a restrictive and limited licensing scheme that did nothing to right the historical wrongs caused by the criminalization of cannabis. With dispensary licenses limited to only 300 total across the state, including the 100 already existing operators, with program processor licenses limited even further, Maryland then decided to only open the applications to individuals who meet an arbitrary social equity criteria. Once that criteria is met, applicants will be forced to compete in a lottery for a license. The state sold this to the public as fair and equitable, but when you look behind the curtain, there is always more than meets the eye.
I believe that true social justice needs to be given to those who have been disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs. But I do not believe that the current structure or the new Cannabis Reform Act really achieves that goal that they initially set out to achieve. The courts agree with us as well. We believe that restorative justice could come in the form of financial support to those who have truly been negatively impacted by the war on drugs, not just a zip code or an area. We need to truly benefit the families whose lives have been devastated from imprisonment by the war on drugs.
Darmedrick D'Roc Palmer is the chairman of the United Empowerment Party, which is a federally recognized political party that focuses on the cannabis industry. The main objective of the UEP is to unite the cannabis industry to safeguard small businesses in the supply chain. He is also a co-founder of the Maryland Cannabis Equity Collective and the owner of Extreme Terps Wellness, one of Maryland's first Black-owned CBD and hemp companies. He believes that the state of Maryland is stunting the growth of the industry and holding back both the plant and the communities that championed it from reaching their full potential both economically and in terms of research and scientific advancements.
In my opinion, again, these laws are unjust. We're trying to free the plant, and we're trying to make sure that we take the handcuffs off the plant. To me, it actually seems like it's working in reverse. In order for this industry to prosper, these laws and legislations have to be catered to businesses that are actually trying to create change. Putting restrictions on an industry that was already flourishing, right? We were already flourishing. To me, the laws has been adjusted again to focus on MSOs and more on the cannabis market than the overall picture. I think this act that's in place is just something to put in place so they can rush to get to market, right? A lot of Maryland, I think the system has lagged for so long and pushed this out to the point where they're rushing to put these pieces in place. This act is not going to do anything but cause more issues, especially in the streets. It's not going to benefit the community. I'm going to repeat it again. I feel as though this market is catered to MSOs and larger, bigger companies. It is not made for, or it's not structured for our community to come in as being welcome to this community, to the cannabis industry itself. I think it's just a false flag. It's been shown before. It has been shown in multiple other states. To me, I have so much common sense that it baffles me for them not to look at other states and look at how certain laws and legislations that they're putting in place right now harms the community.
The need for social equity and restorative justice measures in the cannabis industry is crucial to rectify the harms caused by cannabis criminalization. However, the systems and frameworks established to achieve this goal fall short. Instead of serving their purpose, these systems are manipulated by lawyers, lobbyists, and corporate interests. This manipulation skews the intended outcomes, leading to a scenario where the objectives of social justice and equitable market access are never realized. The result is a landscape where the very communities these policies aim to support are still left at a disadvantage, while larger, more resourceful entities find ways to benefit from these systems.
Social equity in cannabis is a joke. It's an absolute joke. It is a joke. It's a smokescreen. How do you put me out of business and call it social equity? I challenge anyone who's watching this to answer that question. How do you put me out of business? You don't even know me. If we understand what they are saying to us when they're calling things social equity, it is not that, you know? So social equity is throwing your name in a hat that says, hopefully this number is going to hit on your name. That's a lottery ticket that I have to pay for. That's not social equity. It doesn't repair any of the damage that's been done by the war on drugs. You know, I'm a kid who's born in the 70s, believe it or not. Like, I've seen the damage of what the war on drugs has done. I've seen the damage of what police have done in the street. I've seen the damage of what so-called religious institutions have done in the street. I've seen the damage of redwooders getting taken out of their home off a small bag of weed and the devastation that does on a family. And then you're going to give them a lottery ticket to say, oh yeah, well, you might qualify. If we've actually contributed to the industry, how would anyone else believe that there's an opportunity for them?
LaJuan Stribling has been an advocate for true cannabis freedom for many years. She's been very vocal during legislative sessions about the need for real restorative justice measures to be taken by the state as they begin to legalize cannabis. Although she is someone who has personally been negatively impacted by the war on drugs, she's unable to even apply for a license because of the zip code she lives in and the school she attended. LaJuan believes that the social equity provisions in the bill fall short of any true justice for her and her community in Maryland.
I'm not someone who represents the class of people who could just have endless money, right? So people like me, I feel like are being ignored, especially when it comes to social equity. Some things are not accessible for us. Some people don't have transportation to get to dispensaries. So you want to have full freedom at home. And with that, to me, in my opinion, is full decriminalization. Social equity for people to have cottage businesses. There's still need for me, in my opinion, that you have to go through the loopholes, which is money, y'all. It's the money. They just want more money from people, and that means you have to have access. And with that, that means you're cutting out so many families. I'm one of those families who's being cut out. Someone who was homeless, I was a ward of the state. I've been a single parent to 2 children. One of my children's father has been murdered because of drugs, the war on drugs in this community in DC. It's just so much you can say that I don't even want to go through this line of what I've gone through, but it's many people in my situation, plus worse. Their parents are still incarcerated because of this prohibition. So how is this equitable?
And I'm very surprised that the state that I talk about so lovingly that, you know, oh man, you should move to Maryland. You know, there's opportunities here for people. You know, you can buy a house, you can get equity and all these things. And we got the bay and all this, we got the beaches, we got mountains, we got cities. And my state says to me, we don't appreciate your contribution, nor do we think that you, sir, are responsible enough to be a hemp cannabis retailer. We're going to give that to someone else. Thank you. Get the hell out. That's exactly what I feel about my state.
Most families work hard to remove themselves from a zip code that has a lack of resources because you fear that your children are going to end up in the system. You fear yourself or your children are going to end up murdered. So you work and do your best to get out of those neighborhoods. Just because you made it out the neighborhood doesn't mean you're not still suffering or on poverty level, especially for families who have maybe a housing choice voucher or public assistance. That means that they can move out of those zip codes, but yet they're still living on that line. So how can they be excluded?
In order to be considered a social equity applicant, all you have to do is live in a zip code that had 250 cannabis arrests or more. That's it. So if I get arrested for cannabis, my neighbor's never even smoked cannabis in his life, but he's an investment banker or something. He qualifies as a social equity applicant just as much as I do, just because he lives down the street. That makes absolutely no sense. How are you rectifying a situation with individuals who have been arrested for cannabis by painting a social equity with such a broad stroke that people who've never even seen weed in their life could participate in the industry because somebody else got arrested? That makes absolutely no sense. Not to mention they're handing the licenses out through a lottery system. A lottery system completely overlooks merit, completely overlooks experience and understanding of the industry. Hand out licenses based on where you live, where you come from, without even adjusting those zip codes for population. So 250 arrests in this county with 30,000 people, 230 arrests in this county with 8,000 people. Because they had 230 and not 250, they don't qualify, but they only had 7,000 people in that zip code. They didn't adjust it for anything like this, and none of it even makes any sense. Because if you really boil it down to arrests per person in each one of these zip codes, you have less than a 2% chance of actually awarding a license to an individual who was truly disproportionately impacted by the war on cannabis, and a 98% chance that you land on somebody else. Does that sound like social equity? I don't think so. I think that sounds like political pandering.
Don't resolve equity with a lottery, because my life, my children's life, my husband's life, we're not a lottery. We're not a hope and a wish and a dream. We are real people who live here every day and have to pay our bills and taxes and live. And you're excluding us.
In addition to removing our ability to sell these products, the licensing scheme that was attached to this law was, we felt, highly unconstitutional and did nothing to address the stated goal of creating social equity and being behind closed doors in these sessions, trying to avoid what happened to the medical cannabis licensing when that was rolled out and these lawsuits that were created. It did nothing to address that. A limit, a cap on licenses was created solely just to increase the value of those licenses. There's no other reason.
Although the state argued in court that their sole reason for limiting the amount of licenses was centered around public safety, the truth was told by House Economic Matters Chair C.C. Wilson, the sponsor of the bill himself, in a public meeting with Marilyn Normal outside a dispensary in 2022. He states in plain English that the licenses are being limited to increase the value of the licenses, in stark contrast to the arguments presented by the state in court.
And also, the young man talked about capping licenses. Here's the problem with everybody having a license. It becomes valueless. If everybody owns a license, then nobody owns a license. So if we're talking about finances, remember, I'm the chair of Economic Matters, so it is about money. How do I create generational black wealth? I do it by having a license that has value, that you can collateralize, that you can at least get investors on. If everybody has one, then it's worth nothing to anybody.
This speech given by C.C. Wilson was played in court during the hearing on preliminary injunction in the case brought against the state by the hemp industry. The facts at that point became undeniable, that the state was truly involved in market manipulation while waving a false flag of social equity.
Maryland had one opportunity to get it right, be different from the rest of the United States. When it comes to restorative justice, we don't fit the bill here.
The founder of the Maryland Cannabis Equity Collective, Tia Hamilton, has been lobbying and advocating for restorative justice as it relates to formerly and presently incarcerated individuals due to cannabis criminalization. She believes this act does not do enough to right the historic wrongs caused by the war on drugs. She is an advocate for free market principles in cannabis and is working to establish a framework that opens up the cannabis market to those who were truly impacted by criminalization and for legacy operators. She believes that Maryland has dropped the ball when it comes to these issues.
It's goofy that only 11 licenses are being given in Baltimore City. Let's just compare that to just the over 600,000 residents here in Baltimore City, right? 600,000 residents here in Baltimore City. They put the social equity with the minorities in it, so that means everyone can apply here in Maryland, in Baltimore City. 600,000 residents, and you want us all to battle for 11 licenses. The state of Maryland has an opportunity to lead the country with opening up the market. If we really want to get into social justice, restorative justice, and giving people chances, it shouldn't even be a limit on the licenses that's given out. It should be open to everyone equally. And the ones who have been incarcerated and who have been time, like they veterans. You know what I'm saying? They veterans of the street. You know what I'm saying? We should have a day too. And if they did that and open it up to us, it allows us to get our records clean, get capital to start up our business, show us how to run our business. We already know that we know how to run the damn business. We accountants, we CEOs, we supervisors, we bookkeepers, we security. We are marketing geniuses. And if you give us that opportunity to take those transferable skills to this side of the fence and watch us blow, that may be the reason on why they don't want us to be a part. Because they know if black people get involved, if drug dealers get involved, these real street people know how to do this work, get involved, they will lose heavy.
America is about free enterprise, free markets. America is about fair competition. America knows that competition breeds innovation. and it also forces down prices so people can have better products, more cool and new and different products at better pricing at more places. And then at that point, you'll have no need for an illicit market. Just open the door, let everybody play. Tax us all the same way. You'll make just as much money, if not more, if you open it to everyone. But if your mindset is to limit the amount of licenses, to increase your tax revenue, and to make those licenses more valuable, then that's you playing around and manipulating markets. If that was done in the private sector, that would be illegal. But we allow it in cannabis, and we allow it in our government. It has to change.
They see an industry where they know there's a lot of money involved, and they want to step into the shoes of the cartel. And you say, well, isn't that a little harsh to say it's the cartel? Well, let's put it this way. If I compete with them, they'll lock me up in jail. And if I resist being locked up in jail, then they'll kill me. That's exactly what the cartel did to prevent competition. They'd give you a warning, and then they'd kill you. So other than the fact that they have the cover of the General Assembly saying it's okay, they have placed themselves in the shoes of the cartel with legalized use of force to keep other people from selling the product. This is the state of Maryland wanting to have basically Soviet cannabis.
They're cutting us out of our industry. Why not allow the existing businesses that are already selling these products to continue to sell these products under proper regulatory authority?
These two hemp business owners say they unsuccessfully tried to get the Hogan administration to open the state up to hemp regulations. When more ran on leaving no one behind, they say they were optimistic. Now, with the legislation moving through that they say would cut them out of an industry Congress opened up, that optimism seems to be fading.
That has not happened so far. And again, I think we're running out of time.
When asked about the possibility of these small businesses being forced to close due to regulation, Governor Wes Moore's office issued us a statement, noting the governor released $40 million to help with the upstart process for businesses, adding the funding will be provided to small businesses to unleash the opportunity in communities across the state.
The Social Equity Fund is serving as another pot of money that they get to play with as well through the subsidies that are built into the Social Equity Fund. So the current license holders get to run internship programs for social equity applicants and get reimbursement from the Social Equity Fund for the costs of mentoring new applicants. They can loan the social equity applicants money, and the state will guarantee the loan up to at least $500,000 if it hasn't been modified and increased, which I suspect that it has. But what that means is that the current license holders can handpick the social equity licensees that they know are not going to be able to compete with their production, and they're going to be able to maintain their monopoly. And when those companies fail, they're going to be able to guarantee a large portion of the loans they gave to them. They also get to use the physical infrastructure that they've built within the state and lease it back to the Social Equity Fund. So the current license holders that have overbuilt their infrastructure in Maryland in anticipation for having to offload that infrastructure have a guaranteed leasee, someone who that they can lease the facility to in the guise of the social equity applicant when their production needs decrease. So they have now built into the statute a way to get reimbursed for the rental of their infrastructure to the social equity applicant.
In Maryland's cannabis industry, the lottery system and social equity criteria ostensibly designed to foster fairness and inclusivity are being manipulated by large cannabis multi-state operators, or MSOs. With the assistance of skilled lawyers and lobbyists, these MSOs deploy a strategy involving numerous straw applications. This tactic essentially floods the lottery system with applications tied to these large entities, albeit indirectly, skewing the odds in their favor. This approach not only undermines the spirit of social equity, but also creates a significant barrier for smaller, genuine social equity applicants. It highlights a stark imbalance in the industry, where resource-rich corporations can navigate and manipulate the system, overshadowing the efforts to level the playing field for those historically marginalized in the cannabis market.
Large cannabis corporations can exploit the lottery system by having the ability to afford more application opportunities. Small businesses at $5,000 an application fee, small businesses could only afford to maybe have 1 or 2 applications entered into the lottery system. It would be very easy for a big corporation to be able to spend $1 million and have a significant better odds of winning the lottery than a small business who only puts in 1 or 2 applications. So we've seen large corporations actually exploit the lottery system through straw applications by tapping on the shoulder of a social equity qualifier, tapping on friends and family, putting them at the face of the application, but then setting up a separate operating agreement that social equity qualifier really does not reap the benefits of the business that they helped create. We've actually seen it solicited to many social equity hemp businesses in the state. They've solicited them with business cards and flyers, tapping on their shoulder to be the face of their application, and then offering a simple $100,000 buyout after the application is awarded. But that does not provide true social justice or social reform with legalization of the cannabis plant.
So maybe take some of the money the state of Maryland is making, about $9 million a month, and maybe cut some checks to the people whose lives you destroyed. That's what social justice looks like. That's what social equity looks like. Not, oh, we locked up tens of thousands of Marylanders for cannabis, so we're going to give 11 of you in Baltimore City a license, knowing full well that those licenses will be manipulated by large multi-state operators and massive cannabis companies here in Maryland who will find as many social equity applicants as they can to front the license for them, put their name in the hat dozens and dozens of times, guaranteeing them the licenses, or getting into a predatory partnership with a social equity applicant where that applicant gets gutted inside of an operating agreement. Their profit sharing is diluted to zero. These are the things that these cannabis companies do. They are, for all intents and purposes, they're predatory. So it's important that we acknowledge these things and that we hold our elected officials accountable when they say things like social equity. Okay, if you want to be about it, then be about it. Don't half-ass it like this. Let's really focus on doing what it's going to take to repair the communities that have been hurt by the war on drugs, to free the plant, to return it back to the people, to give equal access to the industry for all Marylanders, all Americans. This is America. We are a free market capitalist society, and government is not meant to be involved in the operations of private businesses. It's time for us to stand up for what's right here.
As one of the lead plaintiffs in the lawsuit, I was one of the first to testify and be cross-examined. They showed their cards early on that the only real defense that they had was going to be to try to discredit our businesses. Little do they know that we built our models on being unimpeachable and that they were in for a challenge. They failed at every turn to discredit us, took zero opportunities to argue anything factual in their defense. And as a result, we were awarded a preliminary injunction.
Recreational marijuana industry expands. A judge gives the green light for the hemp industry to reopen. We begin there. Mackenzie Frost has been following the frustration for many hemp businesses.
And she shares the impact of this judge's ruling.
Many business owners in the hemp industry unsuccessfully tried to get regulations included in Maryland's recreational marijuana plan during the last legislative session. Those attempts were not successful and their products were banned. But now a judge says those sales can once again resume. And one business owner says the fight is not over. In Glen Burnie, flags outside are drawing people inside, where the shelves are full once again.
Everybody can get back to work.
Hemp-derived products like Delta 8 are back for sale.
We want free market cannabis, man.
Business owners like Nicholas Patrick given the green light to start selling these products again by a Washington County judge in this order.
It's a big day for the hemp industry and the greater cannabis industry in general.
Judge Wilson ruled that the Cannabis Reform Act creates an illegal monopoly which, quote, unfairly excludes many from their right to continue or enter a profession of their choosing, all to the detriment of the public. He emphasized that the CRA's licensing scheme unjustly puts legitimate hemp companies out of business and is a, quote, severe and draconian system that fails to benefit the communities supposedly impacted by drug laws. The court also noted that the CRA violates the right to equal protection under the Maryland Declaration of Rights. It barred plaintiffs from continuing legitimate businesses which were still lawful under both state and federal law prior to the Cannabis Reform Act. This sudden change in legality without a rational basis, quote, effectively froze these businesses out of the market. Furthermore, the court found that the CRA's social equity provisions failed to rectify the harms done by the war on drugs. The licensing scheme was based on an assumption that residency in a disproportionately affected community equates to eligibility for a license. However, the court observed that there was, quote, no evidence that this scheme actually benefits those communities.
Judge Wilson agreed with us that the law as it presently exists violates both the equal protection language of the Maryland Declaration of Rights and the anti-monopoly statute in the Maryland Declaration of Rights. And it does so in really three ways, and there's a fourth way that we're still arguing. The first way is the lottery system. In other words, saying you have to submit to a lottery to get a license. The second is in an irrational numerical cap on the number of licenses that can be issued. The third way is in the social equity requirement. If it were done properly, may actually have some merit, but in this case, it's so carelessly drafted. All it does is favor people from certain zip codes without any showing that those people have been adversely affected by the existing cannabis laws.
So yes, we filed a suit, and we filed in Washington County, and a circuit court judge ruled the Maryland General Assembly created an unjust monopoly as a violation of the Article 41 of the Maryland Declaration of Rights. And for me, it feels really good to hear that, and really good to say that, and really good that somebody else can acknowledge what we've known all along, that what's happening in cannabis is unconstitutional.
At the beginning of the court case, it was very obvious that the state only had the goal to dismiss anything we were going to say during the case. They wanted to discredit us as business owners and try to paint us in a poor light. It appeared that their arguments were solely focused around that and really not in defense of their stance on their new law and licensing scheme being monopolistic.
Why did I get involved in the lawsuit? Because I believe it's the right thing to do. I don't believe what's happening here is right. No matter how much I could selfishly say, well, I want it to be us and not them, I don't feel that way. I think that both of these industries have a place in cannabis.
There's no reason for us to limit the licenses the way that we have, and the state's argument is that we're limiting these licenses based on public health and safety criteria. Because if we have too much cannabis, then we have an oversupply, then you have all this legal cannabis escaping into the illicit market. Well, that's foolish thinking, because the truth is, if you limit the amount of licenses, you have extraordinarily high prices at the dispensaries, and that's going to force people into that same black market that you're trying to crush. None of it makes any sense. If you really want to get rid of illicit cannabis, if you really want true social and economic equity, then lower the barriers to entry to the industry so that the average person can put together a couple $1,000 and open up a cannabis business. Why does it have to be so exclusive and restrictive? This plant belongs to the people. For the last 100 years, this plant has belonged to the people. Who do you think kept people interested in cannabis while the state was busy locking people up for it? It was us.
Our laws should facilitate individual liberty. That means our right to fail. That's one way I like to get people to think about it. Rather than using the arteries of the state to protect return on investment for those ultimately who are seeking multi-state, scaled up operations, our laws should first and foremost protect the rights and the interests of the individual. And that includes market access. Because without market access for those who are interested in producing a legal product, then we just have protectionism. I think that protectionism, that is against our state constitution, against our values, and against the interests of the majority of the state. It's also not equity, because fundamentally, those of us who care deeply about economic and social equity, we view the state apparatus protecting the rights of minority special interests as not equitable. It's fundamentally not equitable. Even if you take one part of the African American community and say, I'm going to use the arteries of the state to guarantee intergenerational wealth for just a few African American families at the expense of broad-based economic participation, I think those views are incompatible. I think that it's not a compatible public policy. It's inconsistent public policy. It's using the state to say, we're going to tip the scales, we're going to pick a few people and guarantee their profitability at the expense of our liberty. And I just don't think that that's a fair trade-off, and I think that that's something that the citizens of the state won't tolerate it, quite frankly.
In Judge Brett Wilson's order, he says, quote, it's clear the CRA creates a monopoly that unfairly excludes many people. And based on the testimony from the hemp businesses, they, quote, were no longer viable and they sustained significant losses.
We're praying for the
the end result of this lawsuit to be able to create an industry where cannabis and hemp can coexist, because they should coexist.
Throughout the fight, Patrick and other hemp business owners have said they are not against regulation, arguing the 2018 federal farm bill opened the door for these hemp products that have different plant compounds than cannabis. But right now, there isn't a regulation framework for these hemp products.
We're tired of the cannabis industry beating us down and looking to us like we're some sort of ridiculous problem that they have to solve, when really they should be working with us. We should be collaborating to push this industry forward, and we're hoping that through this lawsuit, we'll be able to establish that.
In a statement, the Maryland Cannabis Administration tells Fox 45 News it is disappointed in the judge's ruling, but says it is committed to moving forward with the recreational cannabis licensing process. Meanwhile, Patrick says he will keep his shelves stocked and his doors open.
The hemp industry is back, the small business community is back, and we couldn't be more pleased with the judge's ruling.
As this lawsuit plays out. I asked Governor Wes Moore's office about this ruling from the judge, but a spokesperson pointed me back to the Cannabis Administration statement instead.
So the central issues we're addressing through the lawsuit is trying to create true social equity and economic equity as well. We are trying to open up the opportunity for a more free market approach to cannabis, especially if these hemp-derived products in the state of Maryland are to be considered as cannabis products. We are trying to loosen the restrictive regulations around cannabis that create a monopoly that favor large corporations. We're trying to open up opportunities for craft cannabis licensing options, a separate tier for hemp producers to operate within the new regulatory scheme that would create more opportunity for small businesses.
In a pivotal moment for cannabis in America, the federal government is at the cusp of redefining its stance on this contentious plant. After decades classified as a Schedule I drug, deemed to have no currently accepted medical use and a high potential for abuse, a seismic shift is underway. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services has ignited debates and hopes alike with its recommendation to the DEA that cannabis be rescheduled to Schedule III of the Controlled Substances Act. This potential reclassification signals a recognition of cannabis's medical value, opening doors to research, medical use, and a softened legal approach.
As I said when I ran for president, no one should be in jail just for using or possessing marijuana. It's already legal in many states, and criminal records for marijuana possession have led to needless barriers to employment, to housing, to educational opportunities. And that's before you address the racial disparities around who suffers the consequences.
Yet as this historic reconsideration unfolds, it becomes entangled in the thorny vines of political maneuvering. In an era where policy and politics are deeply intertwined, the issue of cannabis rescheduling has transcended its roots in public health and science, morphing into a tool wielded for political gains, and the threat of Big Pharma's potential takeover with Schedule III becomes very real. Across the spectrum, politicians leverage the topic to rally support, sway voters, and score points against political opponents.
I really hope we get this done. We're 2 years into the Biden administration, and I honestly had hoped that by now we would have already descheduled marijuana from the Schedule I list. Maybe talk to me a little bit about the challenges that DEA has in this patchwork system where marijuana is federally illegal, but then hemp is allowed under the Farm Bill, and then you got people operating under the color of law in all these states. I mean, doesn't that seem like the least effective way to go about this?
This raises critical questions about the future of cannabis in America. Will the path to reclassification be paved with genuine concern for justice, health, and economic opportunity? Or will it be another chapter in the book of political gamesmanship, where the true potential of cannabis reform gets sidelined by the quest for power?
As we come out of Prohibition, we've seen 3 approaches to legalizing cannabis. The first approach was the medical approach. Then came the recreational approach, which is essentially the medical approach rebranded. Both of those, the medical and recreational cannabis industries, we are seeing failing because of the overburdensome regulations that they have in place. The third approach was the agricultural approach, which provided more opportunities to small businesses and the agricultural community, or the legacy growers that were passionate about this plant, to be able to participate in the cannabis trade. As we see the agricultural approach unfold, we see that there is true benefit for everyone in this industry through that approach, even the consumers of these products.
These industry leaders advocate for resilience and adaptability, urging newcomers to be prepared for the challenges of navigating a market often influenced by monopolistic practices and shifting legislative tides. They emphasize the value of community engagement and building strong networks, underscoring that success in this industry is not just about individual gain, but also about contributing to broader efforts for justice. Above all, they encourage aspiring entrepreneurs to remain steadfast in their vision, advocating for a more open, inclusive, and truly fair cannabis industry.
I think that we need to make sure that families, citizens of the state, have access to this market. And so that means that we need to organize and we need to go and demand that. Otherwise, really the cannabis community is not free. We're not free. The plant is therefore not free. And ultimately, if we love freedom and if we love liberty, and if we think that our elected officials should represent our interests and the interests of the majority of the people of the state, then we need to fix the democratic process. We need to make sure that our elected officials are not taking gobs of money from the industries that they're regulating. I think it's the only way to get them to stop focusing on those who come with big piles of money and instead focus on what will create prosperity and what will create broad-based economic participation for those who wish to participate in the economy.
If somebody were to come to me and say they were interested in joining in the hemp industry and opening a store or starting to grow hemp on a farm or manufacture hemp products, and they were looking for advice on some of the first steps, I would say, first things first, read the laws in your state, regulations and the rules that your Department of Agriculture or, any myriad or litany of other agencies that may regulate the sale of hemp products in your state, read their rules, and then think this would be a moral or an ethical plea, but I would plead with them to do their research on all the products that they sell, have their end consumers in mind when purchasing or manufacturing products. Do your best to market these products responsibly.
Some advice I'd like to give to others who would like to enter this industry is educate yourself, do research, but not just educate yourself, educate others and talk to your legislators, your representatives, inform them of what you have learned and the safety that can be provided for these products through proper testing and regulation. Help remove the stigma circling this plant. Open up opportunities for small businesses to operate in this space.
My passion began at 17 years old when I knew that this plant was amazing. If you have that passion, motivation, love, and drive for freedom, then I would encourage you to go for your goals, go for your dreams, and don't stop until you reach them all. That's what I do, and that's why I'm still here fighting for cannabis freedom, doing all the pivots that I can to stay visible in this industry and never give up. I believe in the power of truth, and I believe that we will succeed.
Do your homework. Let's say do your homework. Know what's coming at you. Start talking to different local legislators, talk to business owners, talk to retailers, talk to manufacturers, talk to licensed people, talk to unlicensed people to get an idea of what this space looks like right now. Because I hate to say it, my state has made a mess out of cannabis.
And the only way to make this change is to make a louder voice. And how do you create a louder voice? Is by joining organizations that we have created and create a bigger circle where we're all saying the same thing and being loud enough to shake up these politicians, making it loud enough where they don't want to hear the noise anymore, right? So it's just like a parent just being in your ear, like constantly, hey, clean your room, right? It's like, hey, wash the dishes, right? So we need to be that voice of the parent and protect this plant and say, hey, politicians, make it fair for everyone. Hey, politicians, let's take away these restrictions that's crippling our community. Hey, can we make more educational platforms? Hey, can we help more medical patients, right? And again, I don't mind being a seat or a front line, but I need support. Our group needs support. Other groups need support. And we did not do this by ourselves. We did it collectively. So if we can do this, then if we have a support system behind us, you know what that does? Fuel us to open up more doors for you, right? And for us, so we can win. This is a way for us to get generational wealth. This is the way for us to crack the code to get out of poverty. right? And if we don't do this, then this is something that's going to be a thought in the past, like, I wish I should have. Don't do that. Don't live in I wish I should have. Live in I will do and I will create, because this is going to create a better opportunity for the next generation.
This whole process has been very damaging to our business. I'm not sure if South Mountain Microfarm or even Sustained Bioceuticals will survive this. We are still keeping up the good fight. It has played a toll on my family. My wife and daughter have seen very little of me, as I've been very active in fighting for more reasonable regulation. It has taken its toll on my parents' financial situation. If we do not succeed in winning this battle, I will lose everything. Most likely will lose my house, I will lose my farm, I will lose my business, I will lose my future. My parents will lose their entire retirement, and the future looks pretty dim for them as well. I'm not the only one who is having these issues as well. There are other small businesses that have jumped into the fight, and their livelihoods are on the line. We need your help and your support to help this effort continue and help us fight back against the big corporate establishment that is trying to control the cannabis industry for pure profit and gain.
It's more desperate now. As far as states facing these battles, we've been relatively successful. We fought very hard and we bootstrapped the association members a lot of these efforts from our own dollars, sacrificing our own businesses. We need help and support now because we have momentum. We are being heard. We are moving the needle. Visit the website, healthyalternativesmd.org.
Now, our win right now is very temporary. We don't know what's going to happen next. They appealed it to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court decided that they didn't want to take up the case. Our case is moving through the appellate court. We have legislative session that's getting ready to start in January. And we're going to need everybody's help and everybody's support to be able to get some common sense legislation past this session that opens cannabis up to the people who deserve to be involved and really rights the wrongs caused by the criminalization of cannabis and does something for the many hundreds of businesses and thousands of people who make up the hemp industry in the state of Maryland. We need your help. We need your support. So please go to www.healthyalternativesmd.org and donate to our cause. You can contact me. Get in contact with us. Go to our website. Find us, talk to us, engage with us, and spread the message.
So we need y'all to start paying attention and reading and understanding. And if you don't know, ask. Because this is about to get real. We need y'all to understand the influence that we have on the world in a global scale, period. Nothing about us without us.
Just because you don't want to contribute doesn't mean we're going to stop fighting, but it'd be a hell of a lot easier if you supported us. So give up some money. I don't say you got to give up all your money. Start with $5, anything. But if enough people give us $5 and we have some say, we have some wind behind our backs, because they're coming at us. And if they're coming at us, they're coming at you. So you think about that while you're watching this.
What does legal cannabis really mean? Is it actually legal? Have we truly freed the plant? Or are we just monetizing it? Are we just doing the same thing that happened with big tobacco, with big pharma? Now we have big cannabis. Why are we doing this? Why do we allow this to happen? It doesn't have to be like this. So we're calling on everybody to support. And I'm also calling on everybody to do yourself a favor and remember that we live in a country, a representative government, an experiment in self-governance, which means we all play a role in how this thing goes down. So it's of the utmost importance that you pay attention to what's going on in your local communities. Pay attention to what's actually written inside of these bills that are introduced in Annapolis and in Washington. Actually read. Don't just take things at face value. Don't fall for the trap and the facade and the hot button words, social equity, restorative justice, because those words are just thrown around sometimes. But if you're really serious about it, then it wouldn't look the way that it looks. So let's all band together, let's push back, and let's make a difference.
As our journey through Maryland's tumultuous cannabis landscape comes to a close, we've witnessed the clash of ideals and realities. The struggle for a free and fair cannabis market in Maryland is more than a mere industry battle. It's a fight for justice, equity, and the entrepreneurial spirit. In this land of contrast, the battle lines are drawn between the monopolistic might of corporate cannabis and the resilient, innovative spirit of the hemp industry. It's a fight that echoes the broader struggle for true freedom and fairness in business and governance. This story is far from over. The seeds of change have been sown by those who dare to dream of a market where opportunity is not confined by monopolies, but flourish in a truly free market. The fight for a fair and equitable cannabis industry in Maryland continues, driven by the relentless spirit of its advocates. As the curtain falls on this chapter, we are reminded that the battle for a free market is not just about cannabis. It's about upholding the values that define us as a society. In Maryland, the fight goes on, with hope and determination leading the way towards a future where fairness, equity, and freedom reign supreme in the cannabis industry and beyond. Thank you for watching Weed Wars, Maryland's Monopoly and the Fight for Free Markets. Visit www.healthyalternativesmd.org to support the fight for a free market in the cannabis industry in Maryland and a paradigm shift in cannabis policy across the country.